Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. As mentioned, talking about the new book, Ashes of Deception. Our guest on the program is the author, Dr. Willoughby Hundley. He was trained at Virginia Commonwealth University's Medical College, now works as an emergency room medicine physician. He is the first book he wrote, an excellent book called M81 Emerging Doctors, gives insight into medical school training, while Ashes of Deception draws on his experiences as a local medical examiner. He lives in his hometown of Boynton, Virginia, with his wife and their dog, and he joins us on This Week in America to talk about his new book, Ashes of Deception. Dr. Hundley, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me.
I love the book, and you've got more in the pipeline, and we'll talk about that during the course of the program. I mentioned your background, and let's talk about in the book. Dr. Obie Hardy is the main character in the book. He's a family physician, a part-time medical examiner. Is this part sort of autobiographical as well?
Certainly, the character development is probably based a lot on my life experiences because I did work as family practice for 25 years in a rural community in Virginia. During that time, I did serve as a part-time medical examiner.
The book is a fascinating read, and it's really interesting because most of us, we hear of medical examiners. We really don't know a whole lot about what they do, how they determine cause of death, their investigation, that type of thing. And we get sort of an inside look at that in the book, Ashes of Deception. The guest and the author is Dr. Willoughby Hundley on today's program. The book is available all across the country. They got Amazon. You can link onto our website and get information and go to directly Dr. Hundley's website, hundleybooks.com. The book basically starts off where Dr. Hardy gets a call. We need a medical examiner. That happens a lot during the course of the book. Is that how the process begins for you, where you get a random phone call that you're now called into action?
Well, that's true. That most of the calls are random. You can't predict when they'll come. Typically only get 8 or 10 calls a year, I guess, per local medical examiner. To make it an interesting read, several years are compressed into about the 2-year span of the book.
And the book is Ashes of Deception. Our guest on the program, Dr. Willoughby Hundley. Let's talk about the specific story without giving too much away. This is a small area that he's medical examiner for, that he's covering that area. He gets a call to go routine investigate what he thinks is going to be a routine death when he starts off.
Yes, it was. Again, it seems you get calls. They don't always give you a lot of information. You could spend time on the phone trying to get more details from the 911 office or whoever's making the call. But a lot of times they don't have all the details. They just say, "Well, it's a death," and it may give you a little bit about the circumstances. So when you get to the scene, you sort of have to start putting things together. Not knowing what equipment to bring and things. And I don't certainly keep a well-equipped medical examiner vehicle with all the stuff I would need in the field because the calls are so infrequent.
When Dr. Hardy gets there, again, not knowing what to expect, he finds that it's a murder-suicide, possibly drugs involved. Talk about that, because that really opens the door to a whole lot of other investigations that will go on in that community.
That particular death scene, of course, was a murder-suicide. Happened in the wee hours of the morning when it was 20 degrees outside, and it was an outside scene. It was dark. You couldn't see. Usually, murders often involve either love triangles, drugs, or money. So this sort of was not unexpected that there would be a drug tie-in with it.
The book is called Ashes of Deception. Dr. Willoughby Hundley, our guest on the program. He's written several books. The first one that we mentioned, he's working on a sequel. Information on that's available in this book called Dr. Hardy M.E. That should be out sometime next year. We're talking about the book, though, Ashes of Deception. In talking about that, it's interesting the different characters in there and how true to life are most of the characters. And I'll focus on Detective Bruce Duffff. He's the working a lot with Dr. Hardy on these cases.
He is a true to life detective, and I think I mentioned in the book there were 4 detectives in our county. It's a rural county, has a population of like under 40,000. So it's not that many investigators. So the fact that he did a majority of the work in the investigations in this book is not unreal. That's sort of how it goes.
Local cocaine dealer Skeeter Davis, explain briefly who he is, very prominent in the story in the book Ashes of Deception.
And he again is drawn after the image of a real criminal that was in our county that had some dealings. Of course, it's not factual and it's not biographical in any way. In that way, I can't say that he did this crime or he did that crime, and it certainly is not the name of the character in the book. But there were some dealings that actually, as I started writing the book, I found out there were some links between the, I guess, antagonists in the book and the real life criminal.
Interesting. Did the real life criminal read the book?
If they have it in the prison system, likely.
So he's safe. You don't have to worry about him coming after you. You've got an interesting character in the book, Dale Gregory. He's a local contractor. He's struggling. He's got issues with his wife, his wandering wife, her finances, and he ends up mysteriously dead. And that's a case you have to investigate.
This was probably one of the reasons I wrote this book. I did have a family who were my patients when I worked as family practice who had their son die, who was a contractor, and they had lingering questions. And a lot of times I would see them in the office and they would say, well, you know this and you know that, and they just couldn't put the issue to rest. And they had several theories about what may have happened. And those theories sort of went in my mind, and I didn't know writing the book which of those theories was going to be the ending of the book. So anyway, I put the one that I thought was the most, well, possibly likely, but also what I would have anticipated would be the better of the endings.
The book is Ashes of Deception. Dr. Willoughby Hundley, our guest on This Week in America. His website is hundleybooks.com. You can link on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And, of course, go to Amazon.com and get information on the book there as well. And I know you mentioned one of the scenes in there, a cockfight, which happened like in 2007. That actually happened. That was a situation that occurred there in real life.
Yes, the town that the book is sort of staged in, or that Dr. Hardy lives in, doesn't have a lot of claims to fame, but one is it was the site of a probably nationally recognized cockfight bust back in 2007.
So you were able to draw on some of the local incidents there to put in the book, and it's interesting as you read that and everything unfolds. The reviews are excellent on the book. Love the story, the character development. You've got a little bit of everything in there. You've got intrigue, and at the end, you've got some surprises. Don't want to give too much away in the book, but the book is an excellent read, Ashes of Deception. The author is Dr. Willoughby Hundley, our guest on This Week in America. Talk about when you started writing this book, as well as the first book that we mentioned a few minutes ago, the book M81, Emerging Doctors. When did you decide, okay, I'm going to take some of these experiences? These are really stories that I can change a little bit, but they're interesting, and I think other people will find them interesting as well. How did you start writing these books?
I did a lot of moonlighting as I was training and even my first years in family practice. A lot of moonlighting in ERs, and I got stuck with a lot of night shifts. Night shifts in the rural areas can be terrifying, and sometimes they're just boring. when they were boring, I would jot down some thoughts from medical school or some of my mentors, some lessons trying to help me remember learning medicine. The other side of that is I got kids. Whenever I would do an ER shift, which was sort of out of my routine, I'd come home. They'd always say, "Well, what happened? What'd you see?" Because everybody was always interested in what happened in the ER. So I sort of started tying those together. So maybe somebody else might want to know about that story too.
And it really makes for fascinating reading. These are stories that we often wonder what goes on in emergency rooms, what goes on with a medical examiner. We hear in the news that they were called to the scene and they've started an investigation. Not quite sure exactly what happens, and you get a real behind-the-scenes look at that in the book, Ashes of Deception. You mentioned before, in developing characters, how do you go about, do you do like an outline before you get started and figure, okay, these are going to be the people, or do you sort of start the story and see where you think it's going to go?
A little of both. I do have certain characters. I do have a general idea of where the story's going, but as you write it, the characters seem to take on their own life, and what they do sometimes isn't what I intended for them to do.
It's interesting. So once they get going, it's like, okay, I can't take them there anymore. They're going in this direction.
That's right. They have their own personality and way of life, so they develop.
How difficult is it in doing a draft, and how many times did you go back and make revisions before you felt like, okay, this book is done. I'm ready for this to go to press now?
That's hard to say because I was rereading the book before we did this interview, and I have so many changes I would like to make to it. It's a never-ending process.
And I hear that quite often in talking to people, that it's like, I'm still not satisfied that is the best I could do. There are a few more things I'd like to tighten up, or I'd like to go a little bit further with that story. So you have the same feeling as most do.
That's right. And I get excited about telling the story at places, and it just goes too fast. It's not enough details or what this person was thinking, or sometimes some of the color or description of the scenes. Some of those sort of, I just blow right through it, and you sort of don't take all of that in.
I mentioned that working on actually several other books, you've got a sequel called Elemental Danger. Tell me a little bit about that. Where does that pick up the story?
It picks up the story by just having the same characters in a similar time frame. It started about the end of this other story, so it flowed in that sense. I guess the main stimulus behind that, it was a mysterious case which still is unsolved, that it started with. But a big thing in Virginia at the time was a debate over uranium mining, and that ties largely into that book.
Be looking forward to that. That will be called Elemental Danger. We'll let you know when that's out. The book we're talking about is Ashes of Deception. Our guest on This Week in America is Dr. Willoughby Hundley, Hundley. His website is hundleybooks.com. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And you've got a book you're working on for next year. This is a different character, Dr. Hardy, M.E. That sounds like that's going to be interesting as well.
It's, I guess, another sequel in the series. Again, it's just in the early stages on that. So it's not much to say on that yet. Similar characters, rural medical examiner investigating deaths.
I really like it. I was glad to hear that there was the sequel to Ashes of Deception. Elemental Danger will be the name of that, with Dr. Obie Hardy and the Detective Bruce Duffff. I really like these two, and it's nice they're going to continue on. As an author, is that sort of fun to okay, I can continue. I like what I've done with their personalities. I like these people. They seem to resonate well. This is going to be good to continue with these.
Yeah, we did bring in a person who's actually mentioned in Ashes of Deception. He's a local reporter, Mark Malone, and he becomes a prominent figure in Elemental Danger, where his covering of stories and crimes and investigations and stuff helps. He gets personally involved and sort of takes the reins in some and helps to solve that one as well. So he takes a prominent role in that one.
Talk about a couple minutes left in the program. Being a medical examiner, especially in a small area, a small county, and I'm coming at it from the aspect that you probably don't see a whole lot of major crime going on there. Is it, when you go out on a call, is it like I really need to be on my toes? Because even though I'm thinking it can't be anything major, just because it's a small town doesn't mean this is not going to be, possibly that really needs further investigation.
A lot of the local rural calls don't need much more investigation. It's either obviously an accident or a natural death. And sometimes, as I guess the death in the beginning of this Ashes of Deception was actually witnessed by the police. The murder wasn't, but the murderer shooting himself happened in front of the police. So, how much do you need to investigate? Well, you know when it happened, who did it. So some of it doesn't need that. And the stuff that we do need, a lot of it is to identify the bodies. And then, if they can identify the bodies and determine the cause of death, then you can piece back together whether it really was an accident or a homicide or something. And this does require certainly more than can be done in the field.
Yeah, the book is Ashes of Deception. Dr. Willoughby Hundley, our guest on This Week in America. A minute or so left here. I mentioned working now as an emergency medicine physician. You're still keeping that notebook there, your mind working when you're on shift, getting ideas?
Well, the ears have gotten a lot busier. I don't have as much free time, but sometimes it helps me unwind at the end of the day when I get home if I write a few notes down or finish developing a thought I had in a couple of days before.
Well, yes, that would be good to have that outlet, to be able to do that. When you get the positive response, and I mentioned that some of the reviews, they love the story, the character development, interesting ending, exciting story. What's it feel like when you get that feedback? When you write this, you have expectations that people will be entertained by this, will enjoy the story. And when you get feedback like that, that's so positive, what does that feel like?
You have to keep it in perspective, of course. I got some feedback with Ashes of Deception that was good. Elemental Danger is out. It's been out shortly. And I didn't have as much feedback with that. And I was thinking this will probably be my last book I'll write. But I got runner-up award in the Green Book Festival 2015. So to get a runner-up award in a national festival like that, it's given me a chance to continue.
Well, congratulations on that. We've enjoyed Ashes of Deception. Elemental Danger is the new one. Working on another book called Dr. Hardy M.E. The first book, M81 Emerging Doctors. That's available, all of the books available and information available at Dr. Hundley's website, hundleybooks.com. Again, Ashes of Deception. Doctor, I enjoyed reading the book. I appreciate you being on the program. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've certainly enjoyed it.
It is our pleasure. And once again, the book is Ashes of Deception. Dr. Willoughby Hundley, our guest and the author. His website is hundleybooks.com. And, of course, information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.